Amidst all the drama from DLC Melbourne, there is a really important meta report to still be done. There's still one final week of set championships. There's still Southside Gaming this weekend that'll be over and being live commentated on Twitch by yours truly and a few others from the community, which we're really excited about. But listen, there's a lot of drama. There's a lot of crazy angst going on around, Twitter, Facebook, all of it. Yeah, it sucks. It's not fun. But today we're here to give you what you really like from this channel on average, which is, of course, the meta report. We're going to break down the top 32. We're also going to break down some of the best decks and some of the really cool stories from the weekend. Let's get into it. The top 32 DLC breakdown was an interesting one. 10 Ruby Sapphires, 9 Amber Steel, 4 Amethyst Emerald, 4 Amethyst Steel, 3 Emerald Steel, 1 Amethyst Ruby, and 1 Sapphire Steel. Now, I know recently we've kind of jumped away from doing just in combinations, but unfortunately, the information about this event is scarce. There are not a lot of deck lists out there. It really was just like pictures that they showcased on screen. So we don't know how many Amber Steel aggros there were, how many Amber Steel songs. We don't have all those information, sadly. So this is just kind of what we have to work with, but it's really just setting a pace of understanding of what that metagame looked like in this 511 player tournament. We did break down all the way to a top 32. Having 10 Ruby Sapphires in top 32, that's that's a lot. Amber Steel also a lot. Two, very, very different decks clashing, which is interesting. So it is showcasing a wide variety of ways to play Disney Lorcana even within that, because even as we saw from the winning deck list that we're about to look at, it's much different than what the normal red-blue decks were, or I should say like the stock blue-red decks were in this tournament. Nonetheless, FAM picked up the win. We sadly do not have all of the decks that I really wanted to cover in this because they just aren't available yet. They weren't showcased. So we're going to do our best and just showcase some of the players that were successful at different, parts of the event itself. So without that, what do you guys think? Red Blue dominant. I've been hearing a lot of calling for ban Hiram and things like that. I'm just, let me know in the comments if you think Red Blue might be a little too good. Amber Steel, it's a little more defensible because there's probably 2 or 3 different versions of that in those 9, which I think is a little bit important to say. Everything else seems to be pretty mellow out, pretty balanced, pretty fair. It's also possible that Red Blue was just really good in this particular event. I don't know. Let me know in the comments how you feel about Ruby Sapphire right now. Quick shout out before we get into the deck list. If you haven't yet, please hit that pin comment right there. Go follow us on Metafy. Lots of free content coming out with all the new cards coming out. There's no way that I'm going to have all this time to make a bunch of videos for cards that are coming out. I mean, we're going to get 204 cards in 3 weeks, maybe even less. So this is where we're going to dump a lot of that content. We're just going to be writing quick articles of daily summaries of some of the cards that were released, some of the more important cards, ups and downs, all those things. So if you really want to keep up to pace with all the cards that are revealed, this is the best place to go and check it out. Follow us on Metafy. Now, let's get into those decks. Din Kang fam, DKP took down DLC Melbourne with a chip and a chair. At the end of the day, DKP is one of the most traveled players in Disney Lorcana. If you guys remember, a few months ago, I interviewed Ding. I'll have that video in the description below, and we just talk about the game. We talk about traveling. We talk about just committing to Disney Lorcana on every level. And I think that no player in the game can argue that they have traveled more than Din. They have tried harder to get a Worlds invite than Din. I believe he played in 4 Disney Lorcana challenges in America and 3 in Europe. I think he missed the first one, and then he went to EUCC. He went to NACC, and now he went to Melbourne. It's insane, but there's no one has tried harder than Din to qualify for Worlds. So this win for Din honestly is just phenomenal. I was very happy to watch him win for more than one reason, in particular in the finals. Obviously, we're not going to talk about that right now, but seriously, thank God. To be honest, just be thankful for FAM, because if he didn't win, way more controversy for sure. But yeah, let's talk about this list. Let's really break it down, because I think it has a lot of really interesting choices. First and foremost, no Sisus whatsoever. Huge difference in a lot of those. No Medusa whatsoever. No Lady Tremaine whatsoever. No Tamatoa. No Lucky Dime. Get rid of all of those cards and bring me McDuck's Manor and a Pirate's Life and 4 Maui Sharks, and we are going to go to town. And of course, the one, the only Super Goof. That's right, Super Goof in red blue. Now, What I do want to point out is that I think that Fam's choice to play this deck was perfect. However, there's been a lot of talks that he just reinvented the format, and I don't think it's very fair to discredit the player that was in the first place overall at EUCC. I personally believe that Din did get some inspiration by the player Kiyoshi from the EUCC that was undefeated in day one going into top 16. That deck did feature manners. It did not feature Lucky Dime. There was obviously some things that were still there, and we weren't completely away from things, such as they still had Medusas and Sisus and things like that. But that overall concept of burn was also in that deck with Flynn Rider. So you had Flynn Rider, Sisu line to counteract the mirror matches, and then you had the end game of your Pirates Lives and Maui Sharks and things like that, along with still playing some of the other bigger cards. What this deck is, in my humble opinion, is that deck tuned. We only had a few weeks between the full reveal of Azurite Sea and EUCC, so not a whole lot of time to really make big impactful decisions and big impactful changes. This deck looks like a deck that said, you know what, there's something there. In order for him to go undefeated in that tournament, there had to be something there. So that's what I believe Din at least got the inspiration for this. I don't recall seeing Din's particular list from NACC, so I'm not really sure how far he was from this list at NACC. I don't know if in the last 3 weeks it just kind of came out and they were trying new stuff and they kind of discovered, hey, this is a really good matchup and do a lot of different things. It plays a little bit differently. People aren't going to know that I'm going to punish them with McDuck's manners. People aren't going to understand that 4 Pirates Life and 4 Maui Sharks is oppressive. So there's a lot of things that I think Din definitely discovered in January that he might not have been able to discover before NACC. All in all, deck was great. It was a little interesting to watch. It felt like the old days of Protect a Castle from Ruby Amethyst players, where they would basically just get a castle in play and try to ride it out with Be Prepared's, Medusas, and Lady Tremaines, and Maleficents even in some cases. So this is what that deck felt like, and this is what it kind of showcased. But bringing in cards like Super Goof is very interesting. There was a play in the finals where Clement was legitimately unable to quest with his Tamatoa, because had he done it, he just would have lost the Super Goof. So obviously at that point in the tournament, very well aware that Super Goof's a gift, is in the deck. He's not going to just simply play into it at that level. But I imagine throughout the day, Super Goof picked up many game-winning lures. Similar to Goat off the top, Super Goof off the top, game 2 lure, go from 18 to 20. I guarantee you lots of people were not expecting those play lines. Again, huge shout out to Fam. It was so great being awake at 3:30 in the morning almost to see you win live, to call the action with Dick, the stream. Also, if you guys want to see the whole stream, that we covered it all. We did 2 whole days of it. It was like 17 hours of streaming, most I've done in quite some time. And it was just great to see it all culminated with Fam picking up the win. Sapphire Steel makes the debut into the top 4 of the DLC Melbourne, played by Lamb Chops. This is a deck that a lot of people were very interested by. They thought the addition of Pyros and Arthur was a very crazy way to kind of close out games and really tipping point and really create turning points in the game. This is definitely a combination we've seen before in Amethyst decks. Some of the more showcase versions of Yensid plays around this, along with the addition of Cogsworth for Amethyst, not your Sapphire one you see here. So it's nice to see that this is getting some type of love. Huge shout out about Pleakley. This is a card that I was kind of high on in November when we did kind of our first videos for Azurite Sea. I had Pleakley as one of the cards to watch out for, and the only thing we've watched out is him do absolutely nothing. So seeing Pleakley get some love is quite interesting. Twinfire was another card that it was always a fringe playable thing. Over the last couple of months of watching Lamb Chops play Sapphire Steel, I know that Twinfire has been in that list in some fashion. I definitely watched a game at CCS 10K where he played a Twinfire. So this is definitely a deck that he's been working on since the beginning of Azurite Sea. I have no idea what his list looked like, in particular from NACC, and if there was any core changes or definitely different changes. But this list, kind of your run-of-the-mill Sapphire Steel. I know that Pyrus might shock people and kind of stand out, but I really think the reason why the Pyros and Arthur thing stands out is just because like Sapphire Steel hasn't been that accessible at all in this manner. So it's not that this hasn't been existed. It's definitely been in a lot of these decks. It just hasn't really performed. So this is the first time we've actually seen a Sapphire Steel wheel deck like this really perform and really go far in a given tournament. So congrats Salam on a top 4 finish. Now let's talk about the Emerald Amethyst that never was. Jesse played Emerald Amethyst to a top 8 finish, losing in a very controversial game 3. Yep, I don't know. I keep trying not to talk about it, guys, but it's really difficult. Seriously, if you want to know more and you have no idea what I'm talking about, just check out the link description below. Cheating, not fun, really, really bad. Don't shark your opponents. But hey, let's give Jesse here his credit and let's break down his deck list. So the key difference here that I think that I do not see too often, but really enjoy when I do, is Lyle. Lyle is a character that when he was first revealed, people were very hype about him. They thought he was going to be over the moon, and they never really saw the light of day. He's come up from time to time in fringe successful tournaments. I think the most recent one I can remember is the Star City Games down in Florida, which he popped up at, but it really hasn't been around since, not in a huge manner. Obviously, this is a deck list that now that it's come out, we're going to look at it again. We're going to know that this is the list that could have been in top 4. This is a list that could have won a Mickey Mouse. It's a list that could have, maybe went the distance and potentially even won a Worlds invite. So for Jesse here, having Lyle is pretty notable. This is a card that really does offset aggro matchups in a really big way. Sir Hiss is one of those cards, again, it's kind of like a hope that it gets there. Having a basic character that you can pump with Crab to remove opposing genies is a big deal. The issue for me has always been the concept of if you're waiting on your Sir Hiss to challenge a genie, there's a better chance that on turn 5 there's going to be an Elsa. Now, granted, if you can set up your own lines somehow and make it work where you can play your Elsa, tap their genie, and then run a Crab into something, you have to really set up this whole line of plays of Hiss into Crab, into Genie, into Genie, into Elsa. Like all these things have to kind of like play out for you. So for me, Sir Hiss has always been like a very meh card, a very like self-reliant card where I feel like Cloud Kicker probably does just as much and creates more tempo for you on average, and it's less interaction. But this is kind of like saying like, hey, I'm going to have a couple more copies of Cloud Kicker, a couple more outs to where I just don't get hosed by early evasive lines. So definitely a worthwhile shout out. 4 Genie, 3 Rabbits, lots of draw power in this one. Only 3 Elsa is quite interesting. I do love the idea of not going above 5 ink. I think that this deck is at its best when we are only needing to be at 5 or maybe 6 ink for, Snake plus Rabbit, Snake plus Genie, Snake plus Goat, and things like that to close out games. So that I'm definitely in favor of. All in all, huge shout out to Jesse here on a top 8 finish. And, from like me to you, my condolences on your weekend. You did message me right away, and I really appreciated that, seeing and reading your side of the story. So, on behalf of Forbidden Mountain players that, have been to every DLC in North America, seeing your first DLC kind of get really ruined in a really awful manner, I can't be more sorry for that. Hopefully it doesn't deter you from continuing your journey in Disney Lorcana. We really hope that for the best for you. And I can't kind of honestly wait to see what you do next in Disney Lorcana. But seriously, congratulations on a top 8 finish in your very first DLC. Emerald Steel also finished in top 8 of the DLC Melbourne. And guys, like seriously, for a second here, where was Emerald Steel? I mean, like, we watched Ruby Sapphire after Amber Steel for hours. I mean, that's the only decks that were in the tournament. I didn't even know that an Emerald Steel player finished in top 8 until well after the fact. I can't believe that we didn't get Emerald Steel on camera at all. And the crazy thing is that had we got Emerald Steel on camera, we probably never get the top 8 incident that we did with Reclam. So this is wild that all things and purposes intended that like there was an Emerald Steel deck in the tournament and had no idea. And I really like the spice in this list. Going back to a more doc aggro version, this is great. You're seeing 2 docs in this list. We got the Muses still. We're still doing everything we want to with Prince John and Diablo, along with Ursula. So we have all those punishing lines. The thing that we took out is the morph line. So we no longer have the morph into Beast or morph into any of the other Floodborne characters, etc. But we do now have The Heffalumps and Woozles and I'm Still Here are two, very nice additions to the song package for this list that can both be double sung. Heffalumps is just the 2-cost card that can be sung, but it, can take away a quest early on. It can add another draw card to your hand, which is great. Even when double sung with Ursula, it can basically like say, hey, I'm going to turn off your aggressive lines very early. As another condition, we can't always have Let the Storm Rage on. We can't always have Strength of a Raging Fire. So the next best option is to prevent cards from questing and kind of force them into action through other means. So if you're able to take your opponents off the ability to quest for a turn and draw 2 cards, it gives you the ability to kind of get back in the game, which I think is a big deal. I'm Still Here is another card that's really good at protecting your Diablo early. It's also really good at just protecting like whatever character you want to. If you get to protect your Calhoun, this is awesome. You can just be like, oh, my Calhoun now has resist 3. I'll take out your Smee and have no damage. So those things are really nice. All in all, this deck I still think it's a very weird position within the metagame. And yeah, it's definitely had like a couple successful points now. Zan fishing top 4, this deck in top 8. So it showed that, like, yes, it has potential. I still personally think that a lot of what this deck is doing is battling uphill. So it's not something that I would really just suggest to go and like pick up and play in your last week in the set championships or anything like that. I feel like if you're not a expert Emerald Steel player and you're not, really committed to this in combination, then this shouldn't be a deck that I would like really see just the normal person pick up to like try and win a Scar Mat with. I don't think it's by anywhere like an easy mode button on the format. But again, huge shout out here. Great finish in top 8. I can't believe we didn't get to see you at all on stream. Hey guys, right now we are approaching the final weekend of set championships. With that, we have the wonderful Forbidden Mountain Metafy here that if you are a supporter, there's actually a whole video coming out with all of the supporters and their success through this journey of set championships. And they're here on the supporters. They get in the Discord. They get to talk with us on a consistent basis, have conversations about their decks, have conversations about the meta game. They also get access to these 2 guides for free. The Amethyst Steel Dock Guide, boom, free. Get it all. The Ultimate Meta Guide has transformed a little bit through the last few months into something a bit different than I really had planned it to, that I talked about months ago. But now it's been updated the last couple of weeks. There's more and more content being added to it, and it's also there for free with the support tier. So go in, hit the link in the description below, check us out. Make sure you at least follow us on Metafy to see all the free stuff. And if you want to support the channel, this is the best way to do it. Hit that support tier, join the Discord community, get a part of the conversation, and make yourself better at Disney.com. Amber Steel Mines, played by Jian Chao. This is a top 16 performance here. So if we were in NA or EU, this would have been a qualifying deck for your national tournament. As of right now, Australia is not getting a national tournament. It went straight to Worlds invites instead. I think that next year they will have their own nationals is my best bet, or their own continentals. I think that's exactly what's going to happen. But this is the type of list that we have seen a little bit over the last few weeks. It is very similar to the list that Kurt Spies played, to a top 4 finish on day 1 of Swiss, I believe, of NACC. And then he unfortunately lost in the top 8, but did get himself an invite to Worlds. Rapunzel's Tower is the card that really sticks out, and a lot of players may not have actually seen before. I don't even know how much Kurt's deck would have been covered. So Rapunzel's Tower is a 2-cost inkable, 1 to move to 8 willpower with the ability Safe and Sound. Characters get +3 willpower while here. So this is the ultimate Rapunzel bait. But the idea that you can move Calhouns here, we can move Piglets here, we can move Lilos here later in the game, move your Smees. All of those things really add up when you're trying to win a particular game in aggro matchups, and also being a little bit more annoying for control matchups. The idea that Rapunzel is in a way, the Rapunzel's Tower is in a way a slower version of Kita, but it is like a more controlled version, and it's also more difficult in some ways to answer Kita. While Kita can put you in a position that you just flat out lose and get crushed by Sisu lines, Rapunzel's Tower is the opposite, where you get to put it in play and then move all your guys to it. So your Petes, your Lawrences, your Smees, your Calhouns, like all of those cards remain in play through a Sisu, and now are way more reluctant to get through Mauis and things like that. So having a higher health pool is great. It also opens up huge, respectable Rapunzel lines to draw more cards, nothing is crazier than, your turn 1 Cinderella all of a sudden having 4 willpower, running into a 3 strength character, and then you play Rapunzel and you get to draw 3 cards. No one is expecting you to be able to do that with cards like Rapunzel, Piglet, and Lilo, but it can happen. It is realistic because of what Rapunzel's Tower does for this particular deck. All in all, huge shout out to Gian here. Really innovative deck list, in all honesty, because this is a Rapunzel's Tower that, again, we have not seen much of. Not many people have kind of picked it up after NECC, which I thought they were. It was definitely a card that we have been testing too. I think it has some legs for sure. It definitely creates opportunity for you in games that most other cards do not. Scott Kirkham finished in the top 32 of Melbourne with Amethyst Steel Midrange. My one nitpick about this deck is that it is 62 cards. So much for this particular list, and it's making a lot of particular decisions. I think the easiest thing for anyone that wants to play Amethyst Steel Midrange and they're just looking for a deck that they can try and do new stuff, just take out 2 Fire Their Cannons, go to 60 cards, and be at with it. I personally don't think you need a card like Fire the Cannons, but if you don't want to do too much of this list, all I would do is take out 2 Fire the Cannons, go down 2 uninkable slots, which is great, go back to 60 cards, which is even better, and then just understand that this deck can kind of, once again, be built any way you want to. We've talked about this a ton over the last couple weekends, but in all honesty, Amethyst Steel it's like an 80 card deck. It's just pick the best 60 or the 60 that you even want to play and see success with it. Here's 62 cards, and they're all fair choices. There's a reason for all of these cards in this particular decision-making for this weekend. So the idea that you can just see it this way, again, like, there's 4 Pete's, there's 3 Lawrence. Cool. There's no White Roses in this deck. Zach Bivens played White Roses in his list. There's other choices here that are being made as well, where, you might have seen 4 Strength of a Raging Fire, 2 Zeus, things like that. You might see more Bells. You might see more Rabbits. You might see Tinkerbells. You might see 4 Crabs. All of these things go into the decision-making of this deck and understanding that this particular in combination is just very powerful. Huge shout out again to Scott for a top 32 finish in Melbourne. Now for the story of the weekend, and honestly, my favorite story of the weekend because it's one of the most pure and best. Let's talk about Baja Blast. Matt Luhr, top 64, did unfortunately get knocked out in the top 64, but he was representing the Sapphire Emerald sensation of Bend to My Will. This is a deck that we have been covering on the channel over and over again. We've talked about it a bunch. This is a version of that deck. There are things about this list that I love, and then there are things about this deck that I do not like. However, the best and key component here is that this is another proof of concept moment where this deck was probably very low played in the format. There might have only been, less than 5 players that even registered Emerald Sapphire. And Matt was able to find his way into a day 2, even with starting 0-1-0. That's right. So story time, because I think it's worth it in this particular case. But Matt here showed up to the Disney Lorcana Melbourne and only owned 12 cards. He only started playing Disney Lorcana 2 weeks ago. He showed up looking for the cards to play in his deck. He actually took the time during the player meetings, got some of the cards. Round 1 pairings went up. His deck wasn't done. He said, hey, I got to concede to you. You're going to win. He took an hour of that time to run around and build his deck. I mean, that's actually insane. He showed up to a DLC, registered to play, and didn't have the deck to play. Took a round 1 loss, and then rallied back all the way to borrowing the cards from different members of the community and finishing in the top 64. Won a Let It Go. I mean, that's a crazy story. The idea 2 weeks ago, just started playing the game, is following different people and different, communities of this deck being successful. For whatever reason, was drawn to it, loved it. Obviously, it is a bit of a budget deck. Now, this list, a little bit more expensive. It has Baymaxes in it. It has John Silver's in it. So that definitely increases the expenses of this deck. It's probably maybe a little bit over $100 is my guess. I don't know the exact tag for Baymaxes and John Silver's at this moment, but let's just say they're $5 each, which is probably low. That definitely takes this deck to a $100 deck. The version that we have been communicating, I think right now is $80. But we're still talking about a $100 deck in a tournament to win a Let It Go. Huge. I mean, absolutely amazing showing. Crazy story. I'm going to link that story in the description below to his Twitter post about it. Huge shout out to Matt for real success. if you really want to hear more about Emerald Sapphire, then this is the video for you. You should definitely be clicking it. It is a deck that we have really kind of molded over the last month. There is definitely been some updates to it. Again, if you're in the MetaFi, you know them. We've been having conversations about it. We've been talking about the differences and the changes. So definitely go check out the MetaFi if you want more information about this. Of course, if you want the initial reaction, $75, 2,000, click on that video right there. Thank you guys all so much for watching. Huge shout out to Fan for picking up a Worlds invite and a DLC Melbourne win. Absolutely remarkable. And, you know, Ravensburger, let's just do the right thing with commit. Okay. The community is honestly relying on you to do so. See you guys in the next video.